Hi everyone, this is Becky, and I'm recording this little section of the video after I have recorded everything else. I just want to let you know that today I am not going to edit the video. There's going to be some times I make some mistakes and I maybe say to the video, go back and edit this. I can't even remember if I did that because I have recorded today's video in multiple sessions. Just because I needed breaks, I needed a nap. And so I cannot take the time today to go through and edit this. So just in advance, forgive me if there is something that I say halfway through where you're like, why didn't you edit that out? I'm not exactly sure. I can't even remember with all the names that I read today, but I just wanted to give that one little pre-caveat, pre-apology preface to today's reading. All right, I hope you enjoy, and I highly recommend that you just persevere and stick it out to the very end, because those of you that do are going to get extra bonus points today. God bless you, friend, and enjoy today's reading. Hello, my friends, and welcome to day 229 of Wade in the Word. It is really good to be back home with you all. Yesterday, as we started First Chronicles, we learned a ton of information about the writing of the book, the compiling of the book, and then where it actually fell in the order of the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. I'd like to just do a little quick review today so that we can get it really solidified in our minds how the Hebrew Bible itself is organized and compiled. So let's begin. The Hebrew Bible is referred to as the Tanakh. The Hebrew Bible itself is organized into 3 different sections. And what they have done, I don't know who figured it out, but I think it's absolutely brilliant, is they have used the name Tanakh to remind us and have a brain hook on how to remember what the 3 sections of the Hebrew Bible are. The first 2 letters of the word Tanakh stand for the Torah. The Torah comes first. The middle 2 letters, the N and the A, are the brain hook that triggers the Nevi'im section. The N and the N, Nevi'im. And finally, the last 2 letters of the name Tanakh, the K and the H, trigger the brain hook for the 3rd section that starts with the K, the Ketuvim. So let's say these words together. The Hebrew Bible is called the Tanakh. The Tanakh is organized into 3 sections: the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. Let's say those one more time. The Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. The Ketuvim, Vim. Okay, one more time for me. The Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. Now, what books in our Christian Bibles are in each of these 3 sections? Well, the Torah represents the law and the instruction that God gave to his people. So just like our Christian Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, opens up with Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And they receive the beginning, and they receive everything from Abraham, kind of moving on up through Moses, through the Promised Land. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. When you come to the 2nd section of the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, the Nevi'im section, Nevi'im means prophets. And so they start reading the books of the prophets. But this section, the 2nd section itself, is divided into 2 sections. So we've got the 2nd, 2, the 2nd section, which is divided into 2 sections. And the 2 sections are the former prophets and the latter prophets. And how do you remember former and latter? Well, you could alphabetize those words. F comes before L in the alphabet. So it's former prophets and latter prophets. The former prophets include the books of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. And in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, Samuel is one book. In our Christian Bible, it is two, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. In the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, Kings, again, one book. But in our Christian Bibles, it is 1 Kings and 2 Kings. When you're done with the former prophets, then we start reading the latter prophets. And those books include Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the 12. It's kind of cool that they use the number 12 because 12 is a very important number in the kingdom of God. You had the 12 tribes of Judah, or Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. You had the 12 disciples. There's going to be 12 gates on the New Jerusalem. There's going to be 12 layers of foundation in the New Jerusalem. So the number 12 is pretty important. So that can be our brain trigger of the latter prophets having Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then 12. So who were the 12? Well, the 12 prophet books are these books. And in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, all of these books are considered and treated as one book. They are Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Naaman, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and finally Malachi. So that is the second section of the Tanakh. That is the Nevi'im section that started with former prophets, then went to latter prophets, which fell off of my little desk area, and the 12. That takes us to the third section of the Tanakh, the Ketuvim. And the Ketuvim means the writings. So these end up being the books in our Christian Bibles of the Psalms, the Proverbs, Job, Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and finally Chronicles. And in the Tanakh, the book of Chronicles, just like the book of Samuel and Samuel and the book of Kings, we don't have first and second, we just have one big book. Whereas we have First Chronicles, which we've started, and Second Chronicles, not in the Hebrew Bible. It is just one book, Chronicles, and it is the very last book in the Tanakh that they read. So whereas in our Christian Bibles, we end with Malachi, who's really strongly pointing towards the Messiah, in the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish people end with a retelling. After the Babylonian exile, they have been given the permission to come back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. And the question that many of them could have is, are we still God's chosen people? And Chronicles points them towards a definitive yes, yes you are. Let's look at where you came from. This is what you've come from. Here are the genealogies that are holding you together. This is who you are as a people. So let us now go into prayer, and we will just do a little quick read about what we will be reading today, and then we will actually read what we are supposed to be reading today according to our schedule. Would you pray with me, please? Father God, I absolutely think your organization is completely splendid. And yet at the same time, I know you coexist with wild and unorganized. And I just thank you that in your economy, things that seem to be opposite to each other can coexist. I thank you that grief and joy can coexist. I thank you that peace and a righteous indignation can coexist. I thank you, Father, that there is nothing new under the sun, that you have seen it all. And I pray that the choices that I make and that my friends make are choices that move in the things that you've already seen that are goodness and right and just and pure and honoring to you. Lord, I just ask that our hearts would be in position of humble surrender to you today as we come into this time of reading your word, of reading these names who are so special and significant to you. Jesus, I want to do each name honor and justice. So please help me to be able to see and process in my brain quick enough the names that I can do a decent enough job pronouncing them. And we thank you for each name that's on this roll call. That is the generations to come before your son Jesus came to this planet. We give you all thanks and praise, and may there be just a special nugget of learning in today's reading for each of us. We love you, Jesus, and we commit this time to you and invite you in. We pray all this in your name. Amen. Today, we are going to read 1 Chronicles 5 through 9. We're going to continue these genealogies, but these chapters will become much easier, hopefully, to appreciate. Oh, much easier to appreciate, not necessarily read. Once we remember why the chronicler, there's the word, chronicler is recording them. So let's talk about why the chronicler is recording these chapters. He is speaking to a people whose nation has been shattered by exile, and he's reminding them God knows what belongs to him. God remembers every tribe, and covenant faithfulness still matters. Along the way, we have met and we will meet warriors and priests and Levites and kings and even Joshua, tying all of these chapters back to so much of the biblical history that we've already studied. In 1 Chronicles 5, we will read the record of the tribes that settled east of the Jordan River. Do you remember when we looked at the maps and there were some of those tribes over here? Here's the Jordan, and then you have west of the Jordan. Those would be Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. Reuben, if you remember, was Jacob's firstborn son. And because of his serious sin with his father's concubine, Bilhah, he lost the privileges normally associated with the firstborn. The birthright blessing passed to Joseph's descendants, while the royal line would eventually come through Judah. These eastern tribes became strong warriors, and scripture says that when they cried out to God during battle, he answered them because they trusted in him. This is a wonderful reminder that military strength was never Israel's true source of victory. Yet later, these same tribes became unfaithful, worshiping the gods of surrounding peoples, and they were eventually carried into exile by the Assyrians. The chronicler therefore places triumph and tragedy side by side, very much like I had been talking about two things that are opposite coexisting together in God's economy. God responded wonderfully to faith, but persistent idolatry eventually brought covenant judgment. We also encounter the half-tribe of Manasseh in this chapter, descended from Joseph's son Manasseh, reminding us again of Jacob's blessing upon Ephraim and Manasseh in Genesis 48. The chapter's spiritual lesson is really unmistakable. Past victories cannot substitute for present faithfulness. People in this chapter that I would like us to remember are Reuben, who is, as I said, Jacob's firstborn, who forfeited his firstborn privilege through sin. Joseph, who received the birthright inheritance through his sons Ephraim and Manasseh. Judah, although he did not receive the firstborn inheritance, his tribe did receive the royal line from which David and ultimately the Messiah would come. And then finally, Manasseh, who was Joseph's son, whose descendants became one of Israel's tribes. Then we'll move to chapter 6, and we will read about Levi, the priests, and the worship of God. Chapter 6 turns our attention to the tribe of Levi, which was set apart for Israel's worship, priesthood, tabernacle, and later temple service. The genealogy traces the priestly line through Aaron, Moses' brother and Israel's first high priest, and through Aaron's son Eleazar, whose descendants continued the priesthood. We will encounter Phinehas, Aaron's grandson, whom we remember from Numbers 25 for zealously defending the holiness of God during Israel's rebellion at Peor. God subsequently promised his family a lasting priesthood. The chapter eventually reaches Jehozadak, the high priest who was carried into Babylonian exile when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem, showing that even the priestly genealogy passes directly through Israel's national catastrophe. The chronicler also names the Levites appointed by David to lead music and worship at the tabernacle, including Heman, Asaph, and Ethan, connecting Chronicles with many of the Psalms that we have already read. Unlike the other tribes, Levi received no large tribal territory because the Lord himself was their inheritance. Instead, they were given towns throughout Israel from which they served the nation spiritually. For a returned Jewish community rebuilding worship after exile, this genealogy mattered enormously because legitimate priestly and Levitical ancestry determined who could serve in the restored temple. People that I'd like us to remember from this chapter are Levi, Jacob's son and patriarch of the priestly line; Moses, Israel's great prophet and deliverer; Aaron, Moses' brother and Israel's first high priest; Eleazar, Aaron's son, who has succeeded him as high priest; Phinehas, remembered the zeal for God's holiness; Asaph and Heman were important worship leaders whose names are connected with biblical psalms. David was the king who organized Israel's musicians and worship service. Worship has never been an afterthought in Israel. The chronicler spends an entire chapter showing that God carefully provided people whose lives were devoted to bringing his people into worship and preserving holiness in his presence. And then we come to chapter 7. Chapter 7 records several northern tribes, including Issachar, Benjamin, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Asher, emphasizing both their families and their military strength. One particularly beautiful moment occurs in the genealogy of Ephraim, the younger son of Joseph, whom Jacob surprisingly blessed ahead of Manasseh in Genesis 48. Ephraim's family experienced terrible grief when some of his sons were killed, and the text briefly pauses to tell us that Ephraim mourned deeply while his relatives came to comfort him. A very human moment tucked inside a genealogy. Then suddenly we encounter a name we know extremely well, Joshua, son of Nun. Joshua was descended from Ephraim, and centuries later, God chose him to succeed Moses, lead Israel across the Jordan, and bring the tribes into the promised land. This genealogy therefore connects Joseph and Ephraim from Genesis directly to Joshua in the conquest period, showing how the generations of Scripture fit together. Once again, the chronologer is demonstrating that Israel's famous leaders did not simply appear independently. They belonged to families and tribes within a continuing covenant story. I'd like you to remember these people from chapter 7. Issachar, one of Jacob's 12 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's sons, adopted by Jacob as tribal patriarchs, Joshua, son of Nun, descendant of Ephraim, servant of Moses, conqueror of Canaan, and leader immediately preceding the period of the Judges. A truth found in chapter 7 is one name can suddenly illuminate generations of history. Joshua's appearance reminds us that God often prepares his servants through generations before anyone knows what role they will eventually play. In chapter 8, a focus is put primarily on the tribe of Benjamin, another of Jacob's sons, and the younger full brother of Joseph. Benjamin was a comparatively small tribe, and yet it played a major role in Israel's history. The territory of Benjamin lay near Jerusalem, and Israel's first king came from this tribe. The genealogy eventually leads directly to Kish, the father of Saul, and then to Saul's sons, including Jonathan. We remember Saul as Israel's first king, chosen when the nation demanded a monarch like the surrounding nations. He began with considerable promise, but increasingly disobeyed the Lord and eventually lost the kingdom. Jonathan, however, stands in striking contrast to his father. Jonathan loved David, recognized God's calling upon David, and demonstrated extraordinary covenant loyalty, even though David's rise meant Jonathan would never inherit Saul's throne. The genealogy continues through David's son, Mephibosheth, whom David later treated with extraordinary kindness because of his covenant with Jonathan. By including Saul's family immediately before beginning the narrative of David in chapter 10, the chronicler is preparing us for Israel's transition from the failed house of Saul to the covenant dynasty of David. The covenant dynasty of David. So people to remember from chapter 8 include, and are not limited to, Benjamin, Jacob and Rachel's youngest son, and Joseph's brother. Kish, the father of Saul. Saul, Israel's first king. Jonathan, Saul's faithful son and David's beloved covenant friend. And Mephibosheth, Jonathan's disabled son, whom David welcomed to his royal table. A nugget of truth that we can remember from chapter 8 is as follows. Saul's genealogy reminds us that privilege does not guarantee faithfulness. Saul was chosen, anointed, and given extraordinary opportunity, but obedience still mattered. And then we come into chapter 9, our last chapter of today. And in chapter 9, the exiles come home. This is where all these genealogies finally begin to reach the chronicler's own post-exilic world. He tells us directly that Judah was carried into Babylon because of unfaithfulness, and then immediately begins naming the people who returned and resettled Jerusalem. That transition is enormously significant. Judgment was real, but exile was not the final chapter. The returnees included people from Judah and Benjamin, priests, Levites, temple servants, musicians, and especially the gatekeepers, whose responsibility for guarding the sacred precincts is described with surprising detail. Among their ancestors, the chronicler mentions Phinehas, reminding his reader that their restored worship was connected to the ancient priestly tradition going all the way back to Aaron. The Levites were entrusted not merely with practical chores, but with sacred responsibilities involving worship, temple vessels, offerings, music, and maintaining the holiness of God's house. The chapter then unexpectedly repeats part of Saul's genealogy, creating a bridge into chapter 10, where Saul's death will open the way for David's reign. We'll read that tomorrow. Historically and devotionally, chapter 9 says something powerful to the returning Jews. God disciplined his people for covenant unfaithfulness. God disciplined his people for covenant unfaithfulness, but he brought them home and restored their worship. People that I would like to encourage you to remember from this final chapter of today include Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron and representative of faithful priestly service. David. He appears indirectly through the worship structures he had established, which continued to shape Israel generations later. Saul and Jonathan. Their genealogy prepares us for the historical narrative that begins immediately afterward. So, before we begin, what's the big picture? Well, the big picture of chapters 5 through 9 is a beautiful movement through tribes and priests, warriors, Joshua, Saul, exile, restoration. Notice how many periods of biblical history are quietly represented, y'all. We've got the patriarchs, Reuben, Levi, Joseph, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin. We have the Exodus, Moses, Aaron, Eleazar, Phinehas. We have the conquest, Joshua. We have the judges. The tribal period lies immediately behind many of these families. We have the kings, Saul, Jonathan, David. We have exile, Assyria, Babylon. Then we have restoration, the returning Jewish community in Jerusalem. So the person who compiled all of this, the chronicler, is essentially stitching together an entire history that we've been studying. Great. One thing that struck me most strongly in all of these chapters comes from chapter 5. The warriors cry out to God, quote, and he answered their prayer because they trusted in him. And yet later those same tribes abandoned God and they went into exile. And I think that's the tension running throughout Chronicles. God is extraordinarily faithful, but his people are continually called to remain faithful to him. And then chapter 9 gives us hope. The people sinned, the kingdom collapsed, the temple was destroyed, and they were carried away. And yet the people came home. The priests returned, the Levites returned, worship began again. The gates of Jerusalem were guarded again. The songs of Israel were heard again. And that is why these genealogies are actually profoundly devotional. They tell us that discipline is not the same as abandonment. Let me tell you that again. Discipline is not the same as abandonment. God judged Israel's unfaithfulness, but he never forgot his covenant purposes. And perhaps that's the message that all of us should carry into our lives today. God remembers his people. God remembers you. God remembers his promises. And after seasons of failure and loss, God is still capable of writing restoration into the story. So my friend, let me just remind you before we start reading, God remembers you, and God remembers his promises to you that he makes in his word. And after seasons of your failures, your losses, your obedience, your disobedience, he is still capable of writing restoration into your story or into the story of anyone that you love. He is more than able. So with that, let us turn and let's read Chronicles 5-9. Descendants of Reuben. The oldest son of Israel was Reuben, but since he dishonored his father by sleeping with one of his father's concubines, his birthright was given to the sons of his brother Joseph. For this reason, Reuben is not listed in the genealogical records as the firstborn son. The descendants of Judah became the most powerful tribe and provided a ruler for the nation, but the birthright belonged to Joseph. The sons of Reuben, the oldest son of Israel, were Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The descendants of Joel were Shemaiah, Gog, Shimi, Micah, Reaiah, Baal, and Barah. Barah was the leader of the Reubenites when they were taken into captivity by King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria. I remember reading his name. Berah's relatives are listed in their genealogical records by their clans. Jael, the leader, Zechariah, and Bela, son of Azaz, son of Shema, son of Joel. The Reubenites lived in the area that stretches from Aroer to Nebo and Baal-Meon. And since they had so many livestock in the land of Gilead, they spread east toward the edge of the desert that stretches to the Euphrates River. During the reign of Saul, the Reubenites defeated the Hagrites in battle. Then they moved into the Hagrite settlements all along the eastern edge of Gilead. Descendants of Gad. Next to the Reubenites, the descendants of Gad lived in the land of Bashan as far east as Salakah. Joel was the leader in the land of Bashan, and Shapham was second in command, followed by Janai and Shaphath. Their relatives, the leaders of 7 other clans, were Michael, Meshullam, Sheba, Jorai, Jachin, Zia, and Eber. These were all descendants of Abihail, son of Huri, son of Jaroah, son of Gilead, son of Michael, son of Jeshishiah, son of Jado, son of Buz, Ai, son of Abdiel, son of Guni, and the leader of their clans, or was the leader of their clans. The Gadites lived in the land of Gilead, in Bashan, and its villages, and throughout all the pasture lands of Sharon. All of these were listed in the genealogical records during the days of King Jotham of Judah and King Jeroboam of Israel. The tribes east of the Jordan. There were 44,760 capable warriors in the armies of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. They were all skilled in combat and armed with shields, swords, and bows. They waged war against the Hagrites and the Jederites, the Naphishites and the Nodabites. They cried out to God during the battle, and he answered their prayer because they trusted in him. So the Hagrites and all their allies were defeated. The plunder taken from the Hagrites included 50,000 camels, 250,000 sheep and goats, 2,000 donkeys, and 100,000 captives. Many of the Hagrites were killed in the battle because God was fighting against them. The people of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh lived in their land until they were taken into exile. The half-tribe of Manasseh was very large and spread through the land from Bashan to Baal Hermon, Senir, and Mount Hermon. These were the leaders of their clans: Epher, Ishi, Eliel, Azriel, Jeremiah, Hodaviah, and Jadiel. These men had a great reputation as mighty warriors and leaders of their clans. But these tribes were unfaithful to the God of their ancestors. They worshiped the gods of the nations that God had destroyed. So the God of Israel caused King Pul of Assyria, also known as Tiglath-Pileser, to invade the land and take away the people of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh as captives. The Assyrians exiled them to Hala and Habor, Hara, and the Gozan River, where they remain to this day. Chapter 6, the priestly line. The sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The descendants of Kohath included Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uziel. The children of Amram were Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. The sons of Aaron were Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Eleazar was the father of Phinehas. Phinehas was the father of Abishua. Abishua was the father of Buki. Buki was the father of Uzi. Uzi was the father of Zerahiah. Zerahiah was the father of Marioth. Marioth was the father of Amariah. Amariah was the father of Ahitub. Ahitub was the father of Zadok. Zadok was the father of Ahamaz. Ahamaz was the father of Azariah. Azariah was the father of Johanan. Johanan was the father of Azariah, the high priest at the temple built by Solomon in Jerusalem. Azariah was the father of Amariah. Amariah was the father of Ahitub. Didn't I write that name already? Ahitub was the father of Zadok. Zadok was the father of Shallum. Shallum was the father of Hilkiah. Hilkiah was the father of Azariah. Azariah was the father of Seraiah. And Seraiah was the father of Jehozadak, who went into exile when the Lord sent the people of Judah and Jerusalem into captivity under Nebuchadnezzar. That was really cool to read. I remember those people like it was yesterday. And to have their whole priestly line put in motion like that so we could actually see who were the priests, the head priests that were part of Solomon's temple, and then who were the head. I mean, that was the priests, they were the priests back in the tabernacle. That was tabernacle history, all the way to Solomon's temple history, all the way to exile history. That was really cool. The Levite clans. The sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The descendants of Gershon included Libni and Shimei. The descendants of Kohath, okay, now we're on Kohath, we're on Kohath's descendants, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uziel. The descendants of Merari included Mahali, and Mushi. The following were the Levite clans listed according to their ancestral descent. The descendants of Gershon included Libni, Jahath, Zimmah, Joah, Edo, Zerah, and Jeatharai. The descendants of Kohath included Aminadab, Korah, Asher, Elkanah, Abisaph, Asir again, probably a different one though, Tahath, Uriel, Uzziah, and Shaul. The descendants of Elkanah included Amasiah, Ahimoth, Elkanah, Zophai, Nahath, Eliab, Jeroham, Elkanah, and Samuel. The sons of Samuel were Joel, the oldest, and Abijah, the second. The descendants of Merari included Mahali, Libni, Shimei, Uzzah, Shemaiah, Haggiah, and Ahiah. The temple musicians. David assigned the following men to lead the music at the house of the Lord after the ark was placed there. Do you guys remember the Ark of the Covenant? Did we ever find out what happened to it? I kind of forgot about it. These men ministered with music at the tabernacle until Solomon built the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. They carried out their work following all the regulations handed down to them. These are the men who served along with their sons. Oh, these are the musicians. Bless these men. Heman, the musician, was from the clan of Kohath. His genealogy was traced back through Joel, Samuel, Elkanah, Jeroham, Eliel, Toah, Zuph, Elkanah, Mahath, Amasiah, Elkanah, Joel, Azariah, Zephaniah, Tahath, Azir, Abiasaph, Korah, Izhar, Kohath, Levi, and Israel. Heman's first assistant was Asaph from the clan of Gershon. Do you remember Asaph? We read many a psalm written by Asaph. Asaph's genealogy was traced back through Berechiah, Shimei, Michael, Baaseiah, Milkijah, Ethni, Zerah, Adaiah, Ethan, Zimmah, Shimei, Jahath, Gershon, and Levi. Heman's second assistant was Ethan from the clan of Merari. I just was reminded of a psalm today written by Ethan. I think it was Psalm 89. Someone sent it to me. If I had more time, I would go look that up. But here comes this Ethan guy. Heman's second assistant was Ethan from the clan of Merari. Ethan's genealogy was traced back through Kishi, Abdi, Malok, Hashabiah, Amaziah, Hilkiah, Amzi, Bani, Shemer, Mali, Mushi, Merari, and Levi. Their fellow Levites were appointed to various other tasks in the tabernacle, the house of God. Aaron's descendants. Only Aaron and his descendants served as priests. They presented the offerings on the altar of burnt offering and the altar of incense, and they performed all the other duties related to the most holy place. They made atonement for Israel by doing everything that Moses, the servant of God, had commanded them. The descendants of Aaron were Eleazar, Phinehas, Abishua, Buki, Uzi, Zerahiah, Merioth, Amariah, Ahitub, Zadok, and Ahimaaz. Territory for the Levites. This is a record of the towns and territory assigned by means of sacred lots to the descendants of Aaron, who were from the clan of Kohath. This territory included Hebron and its surrounding pasture lands in Judah, but the fields and outlying areas belonging to the city were given to Caleb, son of Jephunneh. Anyway, there's his name. Y'all look at it. Verse 57, so the descendants of Aaron were given the following towns, each with its pasture lands. Hebron, a city of refuge. Libnah, Jatir, Eshtemoa, Holon, Debir, Ain, Juttah, and Beth Shemesh. And from the territory of Benjamin, they were given Gibeon, Geba, Alameth, and Anathoth, each with its pasture lands. So 13 towns were given to the descendants of Aaron. The remaining descendants of Kohath received 10 towns from the territory of the half-tribe of Manasseh by means of sacred lots. The descendants of Gershon received by sacred lots 13 towns from the territories of Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and from the Bashan area of Manasseh east of the Jordan. The descendants of Merari received by sacred lots 12 towns from the territories of Reuben, Gad, and Zebulun. So, the people of Israel assigned all these towns and pasture lands to the Levites. The towns and the territories of Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin, mentioned above, were assigned to them by means of sacred lots. The descendants of Kohath were given the following towns from the territory of Ephraim, each with its pasture lands. Shechem, a city of refuge in the hill country of Ephraim. Gezer, Jokmeam, Beth Horon, Aijalon, and Gath-Rimmon. The remaining descendants of Kohath were assigned the towns of Anir and Belim from the territory of the half-tribe of Manasseh, each with its pasture lands. The descendants of Gershon received the towns of Golan in Bashan and Ashtaroth from the territory of the half-tribe of Manasseh, each with its pasture lands. From the territory of Issachar, they were given Kadesh, Dabarath, Ramoth, and Anem, each with its pasture lands. From the territory of Asher, they received Mashal, Abdon, Hukuk, and Rehob, each with its pasture lands. From the territory of Naphtali, they were given Kadesh in Galilee, Hammam, and Kiriathaim, each with its pasture lands. The remaining descendants of Merari received the towns of Jokneam, Karta, Rimmon, and Tabor from the territory of Zebulun, each with its pasture lands. From the territory of Reuben, east of the Jericho River, opposite Jericho, they received Bezir, a desert town, Jahaz, Kedemoth, and Mephiath, each with its pasture lands. And from the territory of Gad, they received Ramoth in Gilead, Mahanaim, Heshbon, and Jazer, each with its pasture lands. Chapter 7. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 5. It's 5 chapters, guys. 7 is the middle one, halfway there. Descendants of Issachar. The 4 sons of Issachar were Tola, Pua, Jashub, and Shimron. The sons of Tola were Uzi, Rephaiah, Jeriel, Jemiah, Ibsam, and Shemuel. Each of them was the leader of an ancestral clan. At the time of King David, the total number of mighty warriors listed in the records of these clans was 22,600. The sons of Uzi was Azariah. The sons of Azariah were Michael, Obadiah, Joel, and Ishiah. These 5 became the leaders of clans. All of them had many wives and many sons, so the total number of men available for military service among their descendants was 36,000. The total number of mighty warriors from all the clans of the tribes of Issachar was 87,000. All of them were listed in their genealogical records. Descendants of Benjamin. 3 of Benjamin's sons were Bela, Becher, and Jediel. The 5 sons of Bela were Ezbon, Uzi, Uziel, and Jeremoth, and Eri. Each of them was the leader of an ancestral clan. The total number of mighty warriors from these clans was 22,034, as listed in their genealogical records. The sons of Becher were Zemarah, Joash, Eliezer, Elionoiah, Omri, Jeremoth, Abijah, Anathoth, and Elimath. Each of them was the leader of an ancestral clan. The total number of mighty warriors and leaders from these clans was 20,200, as listed in their genealogical records. The son of Jediel was Bilhan. The sons of Bilhan were Jeush, Benjamin, Ehud, Kenanah, Zethan, Tarshish, and Ahishahar. Each of them was the leader of an ancestral clan. From these clans, the total number of mighty warriors ready for war was 17,200. The sons of Ir were Shupim and Hupim. Hushim was the son of Ahir. Descendants of Naphtali. The sons of Naphtali were Jazeel, Guni, Jazir, and Shillem. They were all descendants of Jacob's concubine, Bilhah. Descendants of Manasseh. The descendants of Manasseh through his Armenian concubine included Azriel. She also bore Machir, the father of Gilead. Machir found wives for Hupim and Shupim. Machir had a sister named Maacah. One of his descendants was Zelophehad, who had only daughters. Not Jello, I'm so sorry. Zelophehad, who had only daughters, forgive me. Machir's wife Maacah gave birth to a son, whom she named Peresh. His brother's name was Sheresh. The sons of Peresh were Ulam and Rakem. The son of Ulam was Bedan. All these were considered Gileadites, descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh. Machir's sister, Hamolketh, gave birth to Ishhad, Abizir, and Mala. The sons of Shemida were Ayan, Shechem, Likhi, and Aniam. Descendants of Ephraim. The descendants of Ephraim were Shulalath. Oh, I just totally made that up. Let me try that again. Shuthalah. There we go. Bered, Tahath, Alida, Tahath, Zabad. Isn't this the same one? Shuthalah, Ezer, and Elid. Oh, I might be needing a break here soon. My figure it out fast juices are waning. These two, sorry you guys, let me honor your names a little bit more. These two were killed trying to steal livestock from the local farmers near Gath. Their father Ephraim mourned for them a long time, and his relatives came to comfort him. Afterward, Ephraim slept with his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. Ephraim named him Beriah because of the tragedy his family had suffered. I'm not going to say Ephraim, this might be Beriah. He had a daughter named Shira. Shira built the towns of Lower and Upper Beth Horon and Uzan Shira. Wow. She was probably a force to be reckoned with. I would love to have met her. The descendants of Ephraim included Raphaha, Rishifa. No, that wasn't even it. I'm waning, you guys. I'm sorry. Let me just move on. Tila, Tahan, Ladan, Amihud, Elishama, Nun, and Joshua, son of Nun. We just arrived at Joshua. Okay. The descendants of Ephraim lived in the territory that included Bethel and its surrounding towns to the south, Naran to the east, Gezer and its villages to the west, and Shechem and its surrounding villages to the north, as far as Ai and its towns. Along the border of Manasseh were the towns of Bethshan, Tanakh, Megiddo, Dor, and their surrounding villages. The descendants of Joseph, son of Israel, lived in these towns. Descendants of Asher. The sons of Asher were Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, and Beriah. They had a sister named Sarah. The sons of Beriah were Heber and Machiel, the father of Birzath. The sons of Heber were Japhlet, Shomer, and Hotham. They had a sister named Shua. The sons of Japhlet were Pesach, Bimhah, and Ashvath. The sons of Shomer were Ahi, Roga, Haba, and Aram. The sons of his brother Helem were Zophah, Imnah, Shelish, and Amal. The sons of Zophah were Sua, Harnepher, Shual, Beri, Imrah, Bezer, Had, Shema, Shisha, Ithran, and Bera. The sons of Jether were Jephunneh, Pisha, and Arah. The sons of Ulah were Arah, Haniel, and Rizah. Each of these descendants of Asher was the head of an ancestral clan. They were all selected men, mighty warriors, and outstanding leaders. The total number of men available for military service was 26,000, as listed in their genealogical records. Chapter 8, Descendants of Benjamin. Seems like in chapter 7 we already read this. Okay, well, let's keep going. Benjamin's first son was Bela, the second was Ashbel, the third was Ahara, the fourth was Noha, and the fifth was Rapha. Excuse me, everyone. The sons of Bela were Adar, Gerah, Abihud, Abishua, Naaman, Ahoa, Gerah, Shephufan, and Huram. The sons of Ehud, leaders of the clans living in Geba, were exiled to Manahath. Ehud's sons were Naaman, Abijah, and Gerah. Gera, who led them into exile, was the father of Uzzah and Ahihud. After Shaharaim divorced his wives. I think that is the first time I can remember hearing about anyone divorcing anybody. I'm going to just highlight that because that to me marks a little bit of a unique something. Wow. After Shaharaim divorced his wives, Hushim and Barah, he had children in the land of Moab. His wife, Hodesh, gave birth to Jobab, Zibiah, Misha, Malchem, Juz, Sakiah, and Mirma. These sons all became the leaders of clans. Shaharaim's wife, Hushim, had already given birth to Abitub and Alphal. The sons of Alpal, probably Alpal because there's no H, so it can't be, I don't know. Alpal were Eber, Misham, Shemed, who built the towns of Ono and Lod and their nearby villages, Beriah and Shema. They were the leaders of the clans living in Aijalon, and they drove out the inhabitants of Gath. Io, Shashak, Jeremoth, Zabadiah, Arad, Eder, Michael, Ishpa, and Joha were the sons of Beriah. Zabadiah, Meshulam, Hizki, Heber, Ishmerai, Isliah, and Jobab were the sons of Apal. Jacham, Zikri, Zabdi, Elianai, Zilithai, Eliel, Abadiah, Beriah, and Shimrath were the sons of Shemai. You guys, I'm ready to be done with the names. Pray for me. Ishpan, Eber, Eliel, Abdon, Zikri, Hanan, Hananiah, Elam, Anthothijah, Iphadiah, and Penuel were the sons of Shashak. Shamsharai, Shehariah, Athaliah, Jerushiah, Elijah, and Zikri were the sons of Jeroham. I'm going to highlight Elijah. Because is that our Elijah? I can't remember. These were the leaders of the ancestral clans that were listed in your genealogical records, and they all lived in Jerusalem. The family of Saul. Jael, father of Gibeon, lived in the town of Gibeon. His wife's name was Maacah, and his oldest son was named Abdon. Jael's other sons were, okay, so this is Saul's like great, or something or other. Okay. I'm going back to verse 30. Actually, I'm going back to 29. Jael, the father of Gibeon, lived in the town of Gibeon. His wife's name was Maacah, and his oldest son was named Abdon. Jael's other sons were Zur, Kish, Baal, Ner, Nadab, Gedor, Ahio, Zechariah, and Mikloth, who was the father of Shemim. All these families lived near each other in Jerusalem. That's nice. Ner was the father of Kish. Kish was the father of Saul. Ner was the father of Kish. Kish was the father of Saul. Saul was the father of Jonathan, Malchishua, Abinadab, and Eshbaal. Jonathan was the father of Meribaal. Meribaal was the father of Micah. Micah was the father of Pithon, Melech, goodness gracious, Melech, Tariah, and Ahaz. Ahaz was the father of Jadah. Jadah was the father of Elameth, Azamaveth, and Zimri. Zimri was the father of Moza. Moza was the father of Beniah. Beniah was the father of Raphahiah. Raphahiah was the father of Elisa. Elisa was the father of Aziel. Aziel had 6 sons: Azrikam, Bokeru, Ishmael, Seraiah, Obadiah, and Hanan. These were the sons of Aziel. Aziel's brother Eshek had 3 sons. The first was Ulam, the second was Jeush, the third was Eliphalet. I feel like we read about him. Eliphiet. Ulam's sons were almighty warriors and expert archers. They had many sons and grandsons, 150 in all. Didn't we learn that the descendants of Benjamin were skilled archers? Like, they were the archers, which is maybe why David was so good at a slingshot. Because didn't David also come from the tribe of Bethlehem? Or would he have come from the tribe of Judah? I'm so sorry. I think it would have been Judah. Chapter 9. Here we go. All these were descendants of Benjamin. Oh, in regards to the people we had just read. So, chapter 9. All Israel was listed in the genealogical records in the book of the kings of Israel. One of the resources that the chronologer used to write all of this. Let's continue. The returning exiles. The people of Judah were exiled to Babylon. Why? Let me hear you say it. We should know the answer by now. The people of Judah were exiled to Babylon because they were unfaithful to the Lord. The first of the exiles to return to their property in their former towns were priests, Levites, temple servants, and other Israelites. We read all about that. Some of the people from the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh came and settled in Jerusalem. One family that returned was that of Uthai, son of Ammihud, son of Omri, son of Imri, son of Bani, a descendant of Perez, son of Judah. If my memory serves me correct and I know anything that I'm talking about, which I often wonder if I do, I believe that this, if you want to highlight it, that wonderful little family is in Jesus's lineage. I think that's in Jesus's line. A descendant of Perez, son of Judah. I highlighted it. Here we go, moving on. Others returned from the Shilonite clan, including Asaiah, the oldest, and his sons. I wonder if he's one of the ones that sat down by the river and wept. From the Zerahite clan, Jeuel returned with his relatives. In all, 690 families from the tribe of Judah returned. That's nice. From the tribe of Benjamin came Salu, son of Meshulam, son of Hodaviah, son of Hasanuiah. No, that's not it, but moving on. Ebniah, son of Jeroham. Elah, son of Uzi, son of Mikri, and Meshulam, son of Shephatiah, son of Ruel, son of Abnijah. These were all the leaders, these men were all leaders of clans, my friends, and they were listed in their genealogical records. In all, 956 families from the tribe of Benjamin returned. So we've got men and people from the tribe of Judah and some from the tribe of Benjamin returned. Makes me wonder, oh, and then we have the people from the tribe of Levi that returned. Okay, the returning priests. Among the priests who returned were Jedaiah, Jehoiarib, Jachin, Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Meshulam, son of Zadok, son of Merioth, son of Ahitub. Azariah was the chief officer of the house of God. Other returning priests were Adiah, son of Jehoram, son of Pashur, son of Milkijah, and Messiah, son of Adiel, son of Jazarah, son of Meshulam, son of Meshelemith, son of Emer. In all, 1,760 priests returned. That's a lot of priests. They were the heads of clans and very able men. They were responsible for ministering at the house of God. Beautiful. The returning Levites. The Levites who returned were Shemaiah, son of Hashub, son of Azrikam, son of Hashabiah, a descendant of Merari. Bakbakar, Haresh, Galal, Mattaniah, son of Micah, son of Zikri, son of Asaph. There's our little Asaph guy. Obadiah, son of Shemaiah, son of Galal, son of Jeduth, and Berechiah, son of Asa, son of Elkanah, who lived in the area of Netophah. The gatekeepers who returned were, the Levites who returned, the gatekeepers who returned were Shallum, Akub, Talmon, Ahaman, and their relatives. Shallum was the chief gatekeeper. Prior to this time, they were responsible for the king's gate on the east side. These men served as gatekeepers for the camps of the Levites. Shallum was the son of Kor, a descendant of Abisaph, from the clan of Korah. He and his relatives, the Korites, were responsible for guarding the entrance to the sanctuary, just as their ancestors had guarded the tabernacle in the camp of the Lord. I just think of how wonderful it is to know who your ancestors were, and that they gave their whole life and service to guarding a door in the tabernacle of the Lord. It makes me think, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. And it makes me think of the psalm where it says, I would rather be a gatekeeper in the temple of the Lord than something, something, something. Remember when we read that psalm? It was just, because that's what they did. Phinehas, son of Eleazar, had been in charge of the gatekeepers in earlier times, and the Lord had been with him. And later, Zechariah, son of Meshelemiah, was responsible for guarding the entrance to the tabernacle. In all, there were 212 gatekeepers in those days, and they were listed according to the genealogies in their villages. David and Samuel the seer had appointed their ancestors because they were reliable men. You need a reliable man to be a gatekeeper in the courts of the Lord. These gatekeepers and their descendants by their divisions were responsible for guarding the entrance to the house of the Lord when the house was a tent. The gatekeepers were stationed on all four sides, east, west, north, and south. Their relatives in the villages came regularly to share their duties for 7-day periods. The 4 chief gatekeepers, all Levites, were trusted officials, for they were responsible for the rooms and treasuries of the house of God. They would spend the night around the house of God, since it was their duty to guard it and to open the gates every morning. They were the night guards. Some of the gatekeepers were assigned to care for the various articles used in worship. They checked them in and out to avoid any loss. Others were responsible for the furnishings, the items in the sanctuary, and the supplies such as choice flour, wine, olive oil, frankincense, and spices. But it was the priests who blended the spices. Mattathiah, a Levite and the oldest son of Shallum the Korhite, was entrusted with baking the bread used in the offerings. And some members of the clan of Kohath were in charge of preparing the bread to be set on the table each Sabbath day. The musicians, all prominent Levites, lived at the temple. They were exempt from other responsibilities since they were on duty at all hours. All these men lived in Jerusalem. They were the head of Levite families and were listed as prominent leaders in their genealogical records. King Saul's family tree. Jael, the father of Gibeon, lived in the town of Gibeon. His wife's name was Maacah, and his oldest son was named Abdon. Jael's other sons were Zur, Kish, Baal, Ner, Nadab, Gedor, Ahio, Zechariah, and Mikloth. Mikloth was the father of Shimim. All these families lived near each other in Jerusalem. Ner was the father of Kish. Kish was the father of Saul. Saul was the father of Jonathan, Melchishua, Abinadab, and Eshbaal. Jonathan was the father of Merib-Baal. Merib-Baal was the father of Micah. The sons of Micah were Pithon, Melech, Tahriah, and Ahaz. Ahaz was the father of Jedah. Jedah was the father of Alameth, Azmaveth, and Zimri. Zimri was the father of Moza. Moza was the father of Bineah. Bineah's son was Rephaiah. Rephaiah's son was Elisha. Elisha's son was Aziel. Aziel had 6 sons whose names were Azrikam, Bokeru, Ishmael, Shariah, Obadiah, and Hanan, and these were the sons of Aziel. Wow, and that, my friends, is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, I'm sorry this is a long one. But I love you. And if you have finished all the way to the end, I just want to encourage you to go put 5 gold stars next to your name and take an extra 15 minutes at recess for yourself. You have definitely gone beyond and above and beyond. And if you did not fast forward me at all this whole entire time, I'm going to add to you 10,000 extra bonus points for your tenacity, your determination, and your commitment to the word of the Lord and the honoring of these names and these genealogies. So if you went beyond and if you listened to all of this and didn't fast forward, why don't you give me a thumbs up and I will acknowledge you in the comments. The Lord be with us, my friends, while we are one from another. Tomorrow we start chapter 10 and we read about the death of King Saul. And it looks to me as if maybe, nope, turn the page. It looks to me as if there's more lists of names of amazing human beings that have walked this planet. All right, the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. I hope all is well in your little neck of this world. And I pray that where you plant your feet today, there is joy, peace, love, hope, and goodness. God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching and for waiting in the word of the Lord with me.